Good morning. I realized as I woke up this morning that I'm pretty lucky to have the job I have because I get to go around the world and see really fascinating examples of the ways that companies can create solutions to social problems. I can go to the Philippines and see Ayala developing a clean water delivery system that reaches 6 million low-income people in Manila who did not have adequate access to water before, and makes a profit by doing it. I can go to India and see work that Novartis has done, running health education seminars for rural villagers, having reached 10 million villagers, and now providing their medicines to more than 80 million people in rural India who had no access to these medicines before. I can go to Australia and talk to National Australia Bank and hear from them how they decided a few years ago to change their fee structure so that instead of penalizing people when they get into trouble, when they're behind on their debt, when they are behind on credit card debt or in danger of default, they actually work with them to find solutions. They walked away from $100 million in fee income as they restructured their operations to be sure that when they make a profit, it's in the interest of their customers as well. And they gained 1 million new customers by doing it. I go back to the US and I see General Electric and their Eco-Imagination and Healthy Imagination program now having created more than 100 new products that are more energy efficient or bring access to healthcare treatments to populations in the world that had no access to them before. A part of GE's business that is now growing twice as fast as the rest of their portfolio. I go to Walmart and I see that by changing their energy consumption, changing how they structure their logistics and their fleet, their packaging, how they handle waste, they're saving $3 billion in cost over the next 5 years. I go to France, I go to Veolia, and see how a water company that made its business by selling water to municipalities decided a few years ago that water is a scarce resource, and if the only way we make more money is by selling more water, there's a problem with that. And so they shifted their business model completely to be able to sign contracts with cities where they now get paid based on how much water they save the city. So I get to see all of these wonderful examples of companies doing these things, but what's really even more exciting is a sense that something is changing in the world, that a shift is happening, that there is a new movement about how we see the role of business in society. And whether you call it responsible business or sustainability, inclusive capitalism, market-driven solutions, impact investing, B corporations, the B team, whatever terminology you choose to use, it's the same thing. It's the idea that business can play a role in solving social problems and do so in a way that makes a profit that is in the interest of its shareholders. It's going beyond the idea of a responsible company, a sustainable company, which really emphasizes the company's own footprint and the question of how do we reduce the harm that a company is causing. That's important. That doesn't go away. But what this new way of thinking has added on top of that is to say business has the ability to innovate, the ability to be highly efficient in its enterprises, the technology, the know-how, the global scale of impact and influence to be a powerful player in solving the problems that we have left up to government and the NGO sector before. It doesn't mean that NGOs aren't important. They are an essential element of the equation. And it certainly doesn't mean that government isn't important. It too is an essential element of the equation. But when business engages with social issues, not out of philanthropy and not out of a sense of responsibility, but as a business opportunity, we have seen that they bring a whole new set of resources, a whole new degree of commitment to addressing social problems. And they can do so at a scale that the NGO community rarely is able to achieve. So to me, what is most exciting about my job is the opportunity to see these examples, to see the light go on in a CEO's mind when he recognizes that the things we thought of as externalities, social, environmental impacts that were irrelevant to business strategy, actually can be a source of competitive advantage. At FSG, Michael Porter and I talk about this new movement as the idea of creating shared value. And we've learned when we talk about creating shared value, we also need to explain not just what we mean, but what we do not mean. Because sometimes people hear those words and they think we're talking about shared values, as in the personal values. And of course, it's very important that the leaders of companies have sound personal values. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're really talking about creating economic value and creating measurable impact on a social issue, creating social value. And we don't mean sharing value that's already been created. This is not about redistribution of wealth or more philanthropy. Philanthropy is important. It doesn't go away. It's always necessary. But what we're talking about is really business strategy. And when we talk about this idea of creating shared value, we suggest that it really happens at three different levels. You can think about new products and reaching new markets that you haven't reached before in ways that address social problems. When Novartis finds a way to sell pharmaceuticals in rural villages that had no access to medicine before, they have reached a new market and they have created shared value. When Veolia or National Australia Bank changes their revenue model to be aligned with the interests of their customers or with conservation of scarce resources, and thereby improves their profitability, thereby finds new avenues to generate revenue, they are creating shared value. So that first level is new products and markets. The second level we talk about is around redefining productivity in the value chain. So when Walmart rethinks their energy use, rethinks how they schedule their trucks and handle all of their logistics, and save $3 billion, they've rethought the activities in their value chain from an environmental lens. And what's so amazing to me is that Walmart, this hugely successful company, whose whole competitive positioning is based on being the absolute lowest cost provider. I hope nobody here has the misfortune of selling to Walmart, because I understand it's not a happy experience. They drive costs down as much as possible, and yet they missed $3 billion of cost until a few years ago because they thought the environmental issues were externalities. And so redefining productivity in the value chain. And then the third level is strengthening the cluster, the region, the community where a business operates. One of my favorite examples there is Cisco Systems. We had a very articulate speaker from Cisco earlier. But Cisco discovered about 10 years ago that one of the big constraints on their growth was that there weren't enough network administrators in the world for their customers to hire to maintain the equipment that Cisco wanted to sell them. So they did something very smart. They created a 2-year-long training course, the Networking Academy. It's a distance learning course, but there has to be a physical facility to work on the equipment. And so they actually do this in partnership with universities, with schools, with community-based organizations. They're in virtually every country in the world, and they've trained over the last few years 4 million network administrators. They work in the poor inner cities in the US. They work in a special program with the UN in Muslim countries to bring women into technology jobs who would not otherwise have the opportunity. They are creating immense social value, but they've also fundamentally removed a constraint on their growth and on the growth of their industry by solving a social problem. So it sounds like a wonderful thing, this idea of creating shared value. And I really am inspired again and again as I travel around the world and see examples of this in practice. But it raises a real set of challenges for companies, because companies are used to thinking about these issues as peripheral. And they may have a CSR department, and they may have a philanthropy program or corporate citizenship or community affairs, whatever they want to call it, but those are very much on the periphery of the business. And for shared value to work, it has to become part of the core of the company's competitive differentiation. It has to be embedded in the operations of the company. And so the first thing we see is that companies are not well structured to create shared value, to truly think about social needs and business opportunities together. The second thing we see is that there's a certain queasiness when we start to think about social problems as business opportunities. You know, it's wonderful that Novartis is selling medicines to these very poor rural Indians, but they're making a profit off the backs of the poor. You know, we can do things to clean up the environment, we can do things in many different areas, but if we really apply a rigorous business case, a rigorous business plan to that work, doesn't that somehow feel wrong? Shouldn't we be doing this to be nice or because it's the right thing to do? And it's a hard shift for people to get comfortable saying, actually, if we do this as part of our business, we will bring so many more resources to bear. We will tackle the problem at such a larger scale. If Cisco had approached educating network administrators as a philanthropy program, they surely would not have reached 4 million people in the last few years. And so we need to get comfortable that we can make money by solving social problems. We also need to rethink our competitive positioning. We're finding that companies are beginning to put a social purpose at the core of their competitive positioning. You talk to folks at Nestle, and they will say, we are not a food and beverage company. We are a health and wellness company. We are reformulating thousands of our products to reduce fat, sugar, and salt. But more than that, we have whole research labs devoted to developing new products that meet specific nutritional needs, that are fortified with the micronutrients that the World Health Organization has said are missing in West Africa, that are suited to the particular needs of the elderly, that meet the needs of particular populations. They really are thinking of themselves and their competitive positioning, not just about food, but about health. And we see a whole set of new opportunities there. But perhaps the biggest challenge that we see companies confront is the challenge of measurement. Because companies manage what gets measured, and they report on their key performance indicators, their KPIs. And everybody in every company knows exactly what they need to do to meet their targets from a business and financial point of view. And they're not used to thinking about the same kind of rigorous targets on the social and environmental side. And we don't really have the tools when a trade-off has to be made to understand how we value social impact in particular issues and how we hold that up against a financial cost, the way we would understand two different financial costs. Nestle actually has put in place a new practice that whenever a request for a significant capital allocation goes to the CEO, there has to be a section talking about the shared value that's being created. And they've made decisions to locate factories in Africa and other emerging regions, not where they're the least cost, but where they actually create shared value for those communities in sustainable ways. So how we factor the social dimension into our business decisions is a key issue. And I'm pleased that this will be followed by a panel that Malcolm Prescott is going to moderate from PwC. And PwC has developed a very interesting model that they call total impact measurement and management, which is a way of trying to monetize the social impacts, not for external reporting, but so that companies can make sound decisions internally. And we see that the way companies are measuring and reporting their social and environmental performance through GRI and other kinds of models is not well suited to creating shared value. Because shared value is about corporate strategy, and that means it's about making choices. It's about just a few key issues that really matter to the success of the business and where the business has the capability to really address the social problem at scale. And GRI and other sustainability reporting tries to be very comprehensive. It tries to look at every issue that in society and the environment that a company touches on. And that's a very good thing from the point of view of sustainability and corporate responsibility. But from the point of view of corporate strategy, it's too much. It's too many different things. And from the point of view of the investment community, it's not well correlated with the economic performance and opportunities of the company. And so we're seeing a need to create new measurement tools, both internally to guide management decisions and externally to be able to communicate effectively to shareholders and to other stakeholders the public benefit that a company is creating and the way in which the benefit that they're creating leads to greater economic returns for the company, to greater shareholder value over time. So I want to be clear, particularly since I'm at the Responsible Business Forum, that we don't think shared value replaces social responsibility. We don't think shared value competes with sustainability. Indeed, it overlaps a great deal with sustainability. And when I talk about what Walmart has done to save money, that's a great example of sustainability. It also overlaps with bottom-of-the-pyramid marketing. When I talk about Novartis going into rural India, it's a great example of bottom of the pyramid. In many ways, creating shared value is an umbrella concept that builds on sustainability, that builds on corporate responsibility. But make no mistake, it is a different point of view. And when I sit with company executives and I see that light go on, I see them really begin to talk about a social issue in business terms. Something has shifted, and it's different than the conversations I've had about CSR or about sustainability. So as I said at the beginning, I'm lucky. I have this job. But I really feel part of a global movement that is rethinking the role of business in society, and that is saying, yes, government has a role to play, yes, NGOs have a role to play, but it's time business stopped just thinking about how to do less harm and started to realize that many of the greatest and most profitable business opportunities of the coming decade are to be found in meeting social needs, in solving social problems, in filling the needs of populations that don't have access to goods and services today, of rethinking business models to align what's good for the customer with what's good for the company. You know, one of my favorite examples I should have mentioned in my tour around the world is a health insurance company in South Africa called Discovery Health Insurance. And they found a way to create financial incentives for their members, and they also use social media and other techniques that encourage healthy eating, exercise, healthy behaviors. And it works. Their members live longer, get sick less often, recover more quickly, and therefore, as a health insurance company, they are more profitable than any of their competitors. And they've become the dominant health insurance company in South Africa. Now, what's fascinating about that is they've rethought the nature of insurance, not just to pay the cost, but to actually reduce the risk, to reduce the cost to society, and found a competitive advantage that's more profitable in doing that. Well, I could go on, but I will say that Michael Porter and I are very excited by this new way of thinking, by building on sustainability and responsible behavior to think about really capturing new business opportunities. We've created something called the Shared Value Initiative, which is at sharedvalue.org, a nonprofit organization that is brought together many different companies, many different NGOs, multilaterals like the World Bank and the IFC, to think together about how we can apply this concept to solving social problems and to begin to build a body of knowledge and a set of examples and case studies of how this works in practice. I really believe that everyone here today is here because they care about improving the world. You wouldn't be here otherwise. And I really believe that each of you works very hard and has for a long time through your organizations to do your part to try and make the world a better place. And I believe that this idea of creating shared value and the body of knowledge we're beginning to build around it can be a tool that can be helpful to each of you in thinking about how to reach new audiences, how to build new partnerships, how to expand the impact of your work, how to help you get further in reaching that goal that all of us share. So thank you very much for letting me be with you this morning. I look forward to being part of the panel that follows this. Thank you.